You know, I don't think Dragon Ball's villains get much of a fair shake. Well, not a lot of the series does, thanks to the later half of the story taking up so much of the discourse, with the first half being considered as supplemental far too often despite laying the foundations of the whole story to come. But hey, we gotta start somewhere, so why not with those who mark the shift of Dragon Ball across its whole so directly? After all, it's the villains who are used to dictate the tone and conflict, and with Dragon Ball being an action story that started with a comedic lean, tone and conflict are just as compelling a reason as any. So, to start off, the Pilaf gang doesn't stick around for long, leaving the story rather quickly after being reduced to groveling to higher powers. But for the stretch of the story they take action in, they are a perfect fit for that comedic tone. Made up for through technology and trickery is quite unique relative to the rest of the antagonists of the series, who rely on raw power. And in line with the comedy, what's funny to me is how, in some ways, they're better people than the protagonists. Bulma, Oolong, and Yamcha are practically at each other's throats depending on the wind. Oolong was forced into coming along, Yamcha only joined them on the way to Pilaf out of the desire for the Dragon Balls that he'd stolen, and Bulma is a manipulative little shit. But while they barely get along, in contrast to the heroes and more extreme examples in later antagonists like Frieza and Vegeta, who kill minions because they feel like it, none of the Pilaf gang is expendable. While Pilaf is certainly their leader, he doesn't particularly abuse his position or take out his frustrations on his allies despite having the authority to do so. But Pilaf is still evil, aiming for world domination and prepared to execute the main characters when his attempt fails, as the happiness of others is not something he allows for. On the other hand, Goku's way of life isn't one that impedes on any, while Bulma and Yamcha seek their happiness through love, which inherently needs another. Though they are flawed, Goku sees Bulma and Yamcha as nice people, and they're able to save him from himself after he indirectly saved them. As the story begins its shift from comedy to action, the Red Ribbon Army arc still contains plenty of humor, but also utilizes an antagonist group that is no longer nearly as ineffectual. The Red Ribbon Army being a blight on the people of the world through their brutal mercenary action. But despite their power, their grasp on the world, and the weirdos in their ranks, what I couldn't help but note about their failings is that regardless of the power they had and the ambition of the leader that drove them, what plagued their ranks as they continued to underestimate Goku time and time again is their inclination towards appearances and recurring biases. Most of the other officers look down on Goku and his allies at one point or another. General Blue has an amusing flip in perspective after coming to know Goku's power, his biases going in the opposite direction as he comes to fear all of his allies, even the yet-to-be-unleashed Turtle. When the Dragon Radar comes to light, he assumes its inventor must be Roshi, since he's an old man. The truth of Bulma being its inventor far from his mind, as she's both a woman and a teenager. But Goku doesn't operate like that, having no preconceptions. When Aurelia introduces him to Dr. Senbei, the smartest person she knows, Goku thought she was pointing at Midori. Yet there's no doubt or condescension as he asks her for help. Aurelia implied she was the doctor he was looking for, so he takes it at face value because he has no reason to believe otherwise. He acts based on what he knows from experience without preconception, while the Red Ribbon Army is couched in preconceived belief, to the point that Red, despite being a ruthless and respected leader, can't accept his own height, culminating when his inane wish to be taller, so fitting to the prior arc's silly antics, is instead quashed as Staff Officer Black murders him and takes control, before the organization is brought down by a kid who is even shorter than Commander Red. Goku never let constantly being looked down upon and underestimated for what he looked like get to him, the boy confident in his own strength even after having lost to the likes of Jackie Chun or Tao Pai Pai. Speaking of Tao Pai Pai, for such a notable early antagonist of Goku's, I might have skipped over him before, but though he battles Goku in the Red Ribbon Army arc, it's in the following material, through Ten Shinhan and the Crane School he's connected to, that we really get into what Tao Pai Pai offers to the story on an even more significant scale. As a more serious character even in the scope of his arc, it feels natural to me that he specifically would be expanded on in the following one as the story gets more serious in general. After getting absolutely wrecked, Goku followed up his defeat with a desire to improve himself, training with Korin for 3 days and nights to get to a level where he could properly challenge Tao Pai Pai. Tao, however, upon getting a taste of his own medicine and facing a stronger foe, only thought of victory at any cost, pulling out the weapons that would lead to his own defeat. Though he faced a foe whom he could potentially grow from if he was fighting to better himself, he only fought for money, his power merely being a means to that end, leading to a defeat without desire to grow. Being related to the master of the Crane School, it should be no surprise that his ideology resides there as well. Tenshinhan too wants to be a great assassin like Tao, and the Crane School is one that only values power. A helpful comment on a certain Battle Shonen podcast I'm on even helped me further realize how this differs from the Turtle School's practice. Kuririn baffles Chaozu with math problems, and what really strikes me is that when Chaozu tries to flip the problems back on Kuririn, he answers them with no problem even though, in their battle, he's not obligated to. With Kuririn following the rules he himself set up, however dumb and goofy they are, Chaozu too has to follow them, but he can't. Roshi made a point of ensuring his pupils weren't just made stronger through repeated effort, but literature and education in the basics. His martial arts not being for the sake of power itself, but a way of life through being goodly and working to better oneself. As a result, Kuririn beat Chaozu through more than power, which was all the Crane School knew, leading to Tenshinhan meeting his match much like his idol Tao Pai Pai did once before, and against the same person no less. Goku is able to show Tenshinhan that his path to power, one that is only for defeating others, won't always let him surpass those he wants to defeat. Like Tao supported himself with weapons, the Crane teacher supports Tenshinhan with Chaozu's psychic powers, but he did not accept this. Tenshinhan, meeting someone strong in the form of Goku, comes to desire what Tao couldn't in bettering himself through the stronger foe, the Crane teacher being rejected so their battle can continue properly. Goku might have lost the battle by a hair, but with Tenshinhan and Chaozu coming to deny the teachings of the Crane School, he won the war, the feud coming to an end a short while later. Having grown on his new path, Tenshinhan faces Tao Pai Pai in the next Tenkaichi Budokai, his former idol. Despite having a new cyborg body, he hadn't changed a bit, meeting Tenshinhan's greater strength by discarding the rules of the tournament, aiming to kill him. But Tenshinhan had improved himself far beyond the assassin, shrugging off everything he had to throw at him. His new path had led to him becoming a stronger fighter and a better person, not killing the assassin, but begging his former teacher to never cross his path again as he cast them off for good, the Crane getting a favor that they would never recognize for what it was. But though Tenshinhan growing beyond his former mentors was a journey started from his battle with Goku, it was in between the two tournaments when the story really took hold of that idea. Demon King Piccolo is the past mistakes and regrets of Earth's Kami given form. Putting his life and livelihood above all others, he aims to conquer Earth. But that rule and gradual extermination is one that won't last in his old age. So through the Dragon Balls he maintains a grip on his youth, even in the present despite being a ghost of the past. Though it is a little ironic that despite holding on to the past, Piccolo evokes less of Dragon Ball's past as much as he marks a shift towards the future. His cruelty as a ruler more evocative of the likes of Vegeta or Frieza than anyone before him. The way the Pilaf gang is discarded too just feels like the end of an era. The gag antagonist is gone for the rest of the original manga's run. And yet, the past isn't completely shaken off either, as Piccolo sort of fits neatly in between Pilaf or Red and Frieza. Ultimately, his spawn are tools to his reign, but at their deaths he seems to genuinely feel something for their defeats. It's not feelings for them, per se, but they are his hands reaching out to grasp the world he aims to conquer. His reactions don't match up to them being completely expendable pawns. He knows their strength and respects it, and he views them as extensions of himself, their deaths being met with shock and anger that his rule could have been subverted. And of course, those challenging his rule are those who accept the torch passing rather than see the next generation as a means to an end. Before, the legendary Mutaito sealed him away with the Mafuba, that self-sacrificial technique one Roshi uses to take on Piccolo, and after his failure it's Tenshinhan who aims to learn it. But this self-sacrificial technique is one that previously only paused Piccolo's reign of terror until the present day. Those of the present who attempt the same type of self-sacrifice can't even accomplish that much. These kinds of techniques are commonly ineffective throughout Dragon Ball. As a series that argues for martial arts as a means of self-improvement, self-sacrifice would reasonably be antithetical, and as such is often ineffective. Roshi giving up his life is done for the sake of sealing one foe, pushing that problem into the future, and he took this burden on his own. But what surpasses Roshi sacrificing his life for a chance of success is Goku putting his life on the line to live rather than to die. The super holy water could have killed him, certainly. So could Tao Pai Pai and Demon King Piccolo. It's a slight difference with Roshi, but a major one. In fighting foes who could take his life, Goku is always putting his life on the line. The Zenkai Saiyan boost, a method to improve his power that hinges on how close he gets to death. Risk and sacrifice are not the same. Taking on the super holy water was another battle, and one Goku grew stronger from. able to surpass Roshi and Tenshinhan, who had turned away from the battle, giving up on their own strength and ability to grow by giving their lives in hopes of stemming the threat that was Piccolo for longer rather than quashing it out once and for all. But while the Demon King was beaten through Goku's power, in his last moments he gave up on maintaining himself as an eternal king, matching Roshi in passing on his will to a further generation. Piccolo Jr. twists that idea of taking after one's predecessor to an extreme. At the spry age of 3 years old, he enters the tournament for no other reason than to fulfill his father's vengeance against those warriors he'd never even met before. Even though the Demon King was gone, in following the Demon King he was still beholden to the past rather than having a purpose for himself and his own future. Junior's wrath was not his own. The demon spawned proclaiming his villainy as he fought in the tournament and followed its rules, until he faced the object of his vengeance. And Goku, up against the progeny of the Demon King who'd killed many, including his best friend Kuririn, didn't actually care. While Piccolo may have borne the sin and will of his father, Goku, free of his pretensions as always, saw things as they were and acted as he does. As long as Piccolo fought within the rules, Goku had no reason not to. Even as he threatened and endangered those around him, Goku merely needed to ensure that they were protected. Or save those he'd trapped like Kami, a victim of the reversal of his own technique. At the end of the day, Piccolo Jr. never managed to hurt anyone outside of the rules all the fighters had accepted, though admittedly it wasn't for lack of trying. So when the fight ended due to those rules, Piccolo rightly beaten, Goku didn't feel the need to go further, having had a fight he'd enjoyed. And Piccolo, though vocally he claimed he would one day kill Goku and take over the world, at the end of the day, he wasn't his father, and such an ambition wouldn't come to pass as he came to connect with the son of his enemy, one who was similarly alone and without a father, giving him protection and guidance he'd never had before, and eventually giving his own life to save him. As these two aliens teamed up, both born on Earth despite their alien heritage, it was their foes who evoked a future that could have been Goku's. The Saiyan arc shakes up the status quo like never before, explaining Goku's origin and tying unique aspects of his, like his tail and ape transformation, to a whole race. With Goku now revealed to hail from a race of galactic conquerors, the lightness and humor that codified Dragon Ball more or less takes its leave for the time being. Raditz, Nappa, and Vegeta are Saiyans battle-tested by the galaxy at large, arriving to face off with Goku, a Saiyan coddled by the softness of Earth. By Vegeta's claim, Goku's nature was that of a low-class Saiyan, and nothing against an elite. And yet, so much of Vegeta's method of operation felt less like that of a Saiyan, and more like that of a soldier in Frieza's army. Facing off against the heroes of Earth, Nappa and Vegeta treat their battle like a game, first sending out the Cybermen, then Nappa facing them down at the same time, their numbers gradually falling. They could crush their foes easily by going all out, but there's no fun in that, so they play with their food, giving Goku just enough time to show up and save the day. Where we see this as an example of how Frieza's men operate is when the situation is flipped back on Vegeta on Namek. The Ginyu force may be molded after a Super Sentai team, but when Gerd, distracted by his planned execution of Gohan and Kuririn, was killed by Vegeta, the Ginyu force didn't even care. They were just toying with their food and treating the fight like a game, not an ounce of camaraderie between them. Yet Vegeta had done much the same thing, killing Nappa with a demeanor similar to that of Frieza and his men despite espousing Saiyan pride. The battle between Goku and Vegeta was one of two Saiyans distant from their original culture that had been quashed under Frieza's rule, Vegeta taking to the methods of his oppressor where Goku had become a Saiyan of Earth, and on that planet he'd made tried and true comrades, who continued to stick by him even though they knew they were outmatched. Goku couldn't have beaten Vegeta alone, even with his Kaioken, putting his body on the line to close the massive gap between him and Vegeta, who'd mastered his nature in the form of his beast transformation. Vegeta was still someone Goku couldn't stand up to. But the Goku of Earth wasn't alone. Gohan, Kuririn, and Yajirobe were there for him and fought alongside him. The other fighters may not have been able to surmount Nappa with teamwork alone, but by giving it their all they were able to protect what they could. Those who survived to help Goku only able to do so on the backs of those who'd fallen. Every little piece of hope they could muster building to the end of the fight. And those who survived never gave up despite their losses. The fight brutal as both sides wore each other down like two rocks grinding against each other. Vegeta, the Saiyan in Frieza's army, had been defeated not by Goku, but by Earth itself. Vegeta may have believed himself superior, but in truth, he'd been held back by his subservience to Frieza, coming to grow only when he left his forces. That elitist obsession with natural power is very much a cornerstone of how Frieza and his army operates. If pride and natural power is what matters most, then who needed camaraderie? The obsession with scouters and power levels is something Vegeta even notes as a weakness as he learns how to manipulate his power level and sense that of others on his own, while his former allies end up blind because they only pay attention to what might be a threat to them, despite not even having the imagination and worldliness to envision foes greater than them beyond their ranks, often talking about how their scouters must be broken, barely even being able to rely on the tech that serves as their only window of power level detection. Zarbon, much like Frieza, hid his true power, but Zarbon was something of an outlier in Frieza's forces. It was his beauty he had pride in, and for that pride he tended to avoid using those natural capabilities. His pride led to him being incompatible with the one he served under, keeping away from what made him a fit for the group because of who he was, not so different from Vegeta, who touted his Saiyan pride while under Frieza's heel. But Vegeta moved away from that rule for the sake of his pride, while Zarbon had to throw it away to truly fit among Frieza's men. Captain Ginyu was much more of a fit for Frieza's army. Rather than basing his identity in who he was, he focused his personality on his role as a team leader, if only for the poses they struck. His body was a secondary one. After trading with Goku, Geese takes the transfer in stride, implying that Ginyu has done this at least once in his lifetime, and likely many times. Ginyu chases natural power above all else, leaving who he was behind, the methodology creating the strongest person to serve under Frieza, and also spelling his own demise. Goku may be exceptionally powerful, but his strength was a combination of natural power and heavy training. Without the Kaioken, Ginyu could barely muster a fraction of Goku's expected strength, his pursuit of power without an ounce of effort or self-improvement cutting him off from everything that made Goku strong. Kaioken, comrades, even the Saiyan capabilities like the Super Saiyan would have been out of reach, as to attain them is something one has to accomplish as a person. It was Goku of Earth that defeated the supposed Saiyan ideal that was Vegeta, but it was Goku, Earth's Saiyan, that defeated Frieza. Frieza was the epitome of natural power, having never worked for anything he'd attained. But matching, no, exceeding him, Goku took on everything he was and everything he knew. His heritage as a Saiyan standing against Frieza, the will to defeat their oppressor and genocider inherited from Vegeta, combined with the compassion he got from Earth that turned into his pure-hearted rage at the death of his best friend, Goku accepted who he was and constantly tried to improve, while Frieza, unchallenged, was only stagnant. Even when pushed to his absolute limit, able to exceed Goku for a time, it didn't last. Without stamina earned from effort, he couldn't maintain his power, faltering the moment he reached his peak while Goku had more endurance, so used to being pushed to his limits and beyond. Bringing Frieza down with his own power, the tyrant unable and unwilling to heed the warning of the Saiyan who he viewed as below him, at the end of the day, they were who they were. Goku showed him mercy, being no stranger to foes becoming friends, even giving this mass murderer a chance to improve and be something better after showing regret for his actions. And Frieza continued to be someone who couldn't let others even remotely do anything that could be construed as looking down on him. Following the end of the Galactic Conqueror, the Android arc returns the focus of the story back to Earth. If the Saiyan arc was a dive into Goku's origin as a Saiyan, and the Namek arc an exploration of his legacy as the son of Bardock, the Android arc is a look back into Goku's legacy as a warrior of Earth, keeping the serious tone of the Namek arc while introducing some of his most dangerous and threatening foes yet. While Frieza and his men were undeniably brutal, Jiraiya is a human who threw away that humanity to kill Goku, if he'd ever had any to begin with. His introduction scene is brutal in ways not often seen in Dragon Ball, and that's a little while before Cell started wiping towns off the map. It's no surprise that the most human enemies in the arc are androids 16, 17, and 18, the latter two being kids dragged into a conflict they care little for and casually using their power to do whatever they want, whether that's fulfilling their purpose or simply finding something to do. 16, the robotic, shows his own form of soul and his love for nature and life that others don't seem to consciously note. Jiraiya gave up his humanity and sealed it away, leaving the future to a machine that created Cell. Though biological, personality taken from Goku, Vegeta, Piccolo, and Frieza, he was more like a machine than any of the androids. Cell had no individuality. He stole the energy of other life forms like a parasite, and his techniques were inherited from others. The only thing he can be said to have made on his own was the Cell Juniors, and those were mere copies of himself. His desire to dominate others like Frieza, his Saiyan-like will to fight stronger foes, all wrapped up in a pre-programmed desire to be perfect, to attain the greatest power so he could destroy all those that stood in his way. Even after completing his original goal of defeating Goku, destruction of his enemies is the only thing in his mind as he continued to grow in power. But his idea of growth is one very different than that of his opposition. While Cell continued to absorb power from the androids, we see the limit in this as he spits out Android 18. That borrowed power isn't his, and thus, without it, he's weak. Antithetical to that method of gaining power is Goku and Gohan, who grow through betterment of the self, but also meet a form of limit in the arc. Goku reached what he believed to be his limit in the Room of Spirit and Time, and a brief encounter with Cell is all he needs to understand that he won't be able to beat Cell as he is. Cell, an echo of Goku's past, could not have been beaten by the man himself. Amalgamating almost all of his prior main antagonists in some fashion, being the product of the Red Ribbon Army who incorporated Saiyans, Piccolo, and Frieza into his makeup, what was needed to defeat Cell wasn't something old, but something new. Goku may not have seen his path of personal growth going forward, but he saw the potential in another, even if they didn't see it in themselves. Gohan had the capability to grow beyond Goku, but had never been one for fighting. Though he chose to go to Namek of his own volition, battle was still something he had no want for even if he had great potential for it. Gohan wasn't much like Goku, but it's exactly because he was himself that he had a power within him that he could use to defeat Cell. He was the studious kid who avoided conflict when possible, but he was also someone with a great anger, and even cruelty inside him. Gohan was someone Goku very much wasn't, and so Cell, the product of experiences not his own, could not stand up to something new and frightening to him. Though he had Goku's strength and ability, he didn't have his drive to better himself, cowering into destroying the planet rather than trying to truly grow. His perfection more about the act of being perfect at the cost of others rather than a steady journey. Even on his return, he hadn't changed at all inside. So while his new strength was beyond Gohan, Gohan's spiritual journey had continued. In the Beam Clash, he believed he could not do as his father had in fighting foes stronger than him for so long, and was prepared to give up out of fear. But though he wasn't his father, and no longer with that man who had so many times come to save the day, Goku was still there with him in spirit even if he could only hear him from the afterlife. Rather than act out the cruelty that had led to his father's death, as Cell opted to take everyone with him when his goal was impossible, Gohan honed his anger so that it might protect those he cared about, joined by a father concerned for his son. Cell's empty power finding yet another limit in its false perfection. But though Gohan was able to show a strength Goku couldn't, as the series moved into its conclusive arc, Gohan is shown to have slipped out of form. Though he had such potential, without a true love of fighting, he went soft. This lends itself very well to the arc of Dragon Ball that reincorporates humor into the makeup of the story, creating my personal favorite balance of action and comedy in the series. While Gohan's absurd capabilities are used in his encounters at school, these moments of characters discovering strength beyond the bounds of their knowledge aren't unusual to the history of the series. What is new and just as amusing comes with the arrival of the Lords in response to Babidi and Buu, galactic threats believed to be well beyond Frieza. Though they knew Earth to have amazing warriors, these godly beings are reduced to the same level of Gohan's classmates in shock and awe as they witness the unbelievable power of Earth's mightiest warriors. But while Earth's warriors are up and coming in the galactic scale passing of the torch, it's not so simple within that grouping. After all, Gohan isn't quite up to par. With the coming of the Tenkaichi Budokai, Goku and Vegeta excitedly participate, leaving Gohan's position threatened from the elders, while Goten and Trunks display phenomenal talent, the next generation even more promising than the current one. In their competitive drive and regular self-improvement, it was only natural that they would clash. In comparison, Babidi displays the opposite extreme, copying Bibidi's playbook with no iteration or advancement. He is the extension of that will, carrying on the legacy of the flawed parent figure to the childlike Buu, with no sense of fostering the new whatsoever. But that's not to say fostering the new is easy, as Goku struggled to find a successor. Gohan couldn't come to love fighting, and even with his potential uncapped, he let down his guard in combat and fell prey to Buu. Goten and Trunks had the opposite problem. While they enjoyed fighting, being kids with no experience in real combat, they had no genuine anger or drive to protect. Even when their families were killed, they couldn't get real, being too young to understand the gravity of the situation. By striking the balance between a desire for self-improvement, an enjoyment of fighting, a will to look out for the next generation, and the capacity to get serious to protect what he cares about, Goku remained the bearer of the torch. In his battle with Kid Buu, Vegeta admitted that Goku had every right to be as strong as he was for his drive to be better for the sake of betterment itself, and Goku continued to look out for even his enemies. Though Goku had been surrounded by friends, there was no one really like him. Goku's hopes otherwise had led to the assumption that Gohan had shared his love of fighting, which had led to Piccolo rightfully scolding him during the Cell games for that assumption. His belief that Gotenks could protect the Earth like he had when he was their size had him holding back on Majin Buu, only for them to fail to live up to himself. When he speaks about Kid Buu's loneliness, I can't help but feel Goku felt the same way to a degree, always expected to step up to save everyone, and able to meet the challenge, certainly, but without anyone else to share that burden with. So, he asked the powers that be for a favor. Oob would become Goku's successor, possessing that same enjoyment for fighting that he had, while also possessing an anger he could muster to defend the ones he loved. And with Goku's sons grown, Gohan even having a child of his own, Goku could be there to be the mentor for Oob that Kid Buu never got under Bibbidi or Bobbidi, that Goku wouldn't have had if not for Gohan and Roshi. With Buu's extremes of childishness capped off by Goku after a journey to adulthood, the one who once surpassed his predecessors is only happy to find the one who could accomplish what he once did. The fitting return of the series to its comedy roots, done in a way that ends off on a reflection of how it all began. So yeah, channel's been quiet lately, and all my podcasts. On top of that, this video script is actually getting close to a year old. I was trying to wait until I was closer to actually uploading other videos, but since that doesn't seem to be manifesting, I decided to just upload the video. I've got some personal stuff going on that's not just keeping me from focusing on making videos, but also recording the Weeb Club and Nen show. Unfortunately, I wouldn't expect any of those to return until next year. Even when it comes to my own videos, the ones I actually want to make are ones that will be long or require a bunch of research. I hope you eagerly await them, but sorry, it's going to be a little while. The main reason for this status update is my Patreon, or rather, its closure. Making enough money to live off of through the channel was a prior goal, but I no longer have the time or drive to attempt to do so again. I'm pretty tired of the backlog builders, as much as I'm glad for the chance to check out some stuff I likely never would have time for otherwise, and the Patreon rules at the end, in my opinion, weaken the potentials for video endings by a lot. With all that in mind, I have little reason to keep it up. I'm not sure if I'll delete it yet, but at the very least, I won't be posting on it anymore after October. So I'd like to thank my patrons one last time: Brian Nesseth, Flarbu, Muhammad Akeem, Dojo32161, Brorike, Justice Man, Tengoon, and Offline But Not. Thank you for watching.